The scene is set, a sprawling mansion on a secluded beach, complete with neon lights casting a hypnotic glow over the sands. The air is thick with the sound of pulsating beats. This isn't just any party. It's the Diddy Freak-Off, a legendary bash that promises an unforgettable night of excess, wildness, and pure celebrity chaos. As you step into the massive open-air club space, the first thing you notice is the VIP section where, unsurprisingly, Diddy himself is holding court. Dressed in a custom fur coat, neon shades, and diamond-studded chains, he's holding court with the likes of Beyoncé and Jay-Z. The crowd cheers as he raises a golden goblet, his hand adorned with a ridiculous number of rings. The music is a flawless mix of trap, Afrobeat, and smooth R&B. This is the soundtrack of the night, and every beat is a call to revelry. Around the pool, Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion are locked in a twerking competition, each trying to outdo the other with insane, gravity-defying moves. Cardi is pulling off a split so low it seems physically impossible, while Megan, not to be outdone, breaks into a flawless routine involving a backflip, much to the audience's delight. Every time they drop it low, a group of influencers jumps into the pool, splashing water on everyone as they scream and chant, "WAP, WAP, WAP." At the bar, Kendall Jenner and Hailey Bieber are deep in conversation, but their laughter is drowned out by the shenanigans happening around them. Kendall takes a swig of some neon green concoction, then turns to Hailey, whispering something that makes them both dissolve into giggles. Meanwhile, Machine Gun Kelly, trying to appear cool in his leather jacket, is getting absolutely obliterated at the Drink of the Year challenge. He's spinning in circles after chugging down something bizarrely named the Pink Panther, a drink so potent it turns his tongue green. Tyga, ever the entrepreneur, has a pop-up tattoo station set up by the pool. He's sketching a quick dragon tattoo on an excited fan's arm, while Snoop Dogg, casually lounging in a hammock nearby, lights up something that could only be described as a small forest of weed. The air smells like incense, ganja, and the faintest trace of champagne as the party goes into full swing. In the middle of the dance floor, Drake and Future are holding an impromptu freestyle battle, which is actually just an excuse to take over the mic and serenade the crowd. Drake, in his signature high-end hoodie and joggers, is surprisingly good at both rapping and picking up on the weird energy of the crowd, spitting bars that keep the entire room jumping. Future, in his all-black, high-fashion outfit, is more laid back but somehow makes the crowd scream with every slow and hypnotic line he delivers. But the real spectacle is at the back, where a massive inflatable slide has been erected off the side of the house, leading straight into the ocean. People are running up to take turns on it, with Lil Nas X gleefully racing down, only to flip over halfway through the slide. As he comes crashing into the water, a crowd of partygoers, including a very confused Leonardo DiCaprio and Timothée Chalamet, dive into the ocean to rescue him, though nobody seems to know if they're helping or just trying to get in on the action. At the edge of the mansion's roof, you spot the silhouette of Rihanna, casually perched like a queen, smoking a cigar and taking it all in. She's joined by a dollar AP Rocky, both of them perfectly at ease in this madness, observing the scene from above like modern royalty watching their subjects below. Back on the dance floor, the freak-off contest has officially begun. A massive circle forms as people start showing off their most outlandish moves, some moonwalking, others rolling on the floor, while a few are quite literally just throwing themselves around in a mix of intoxication and joy. Lizzo's in the center, swinging her hips with a confidence that makes everyone stop and stare. The crowd goes wild every time she drops it, and soon she's joined by Channing Tatum, who, for reasons unknown to anyone, is performing a stripper routine that would make Magic Mike proud. As midnight strikes, a giant balloon drop starts, but these aren't your average party balloons. These ones are filled with confetti. No, glitter, maybe? No, these balloons are filled with cash. The crowd goes wild, and everyone from Paris Hilton to Kanye West is diving into the pile like it's Black Friday on steroids. A random group of TikTokers is capturing every second for a live-streamed Money Rain challenge that quickly goes viral. In the back corner, a surprise guest emerges, none other than a hologram of Tupac Shakur, projected by Diddy himself as a tribute to the rap legend. The crowd stands in awe, the mood shifting to something deeply nostalgic and soulful. Everyone takes a moment to honor the greats. The final hours of the night blur together in an unforgettable haze of flashing lights, endless bottles of champagne being popped, and a never-ending sea of famous faces caught in wild, spontaneous moments. As the clock strikes 4 a.m., the party is still going, with Travis Scott up on a stage, grabbing a microphone and shouting, "I don't care if it's Monday, I'm turning this place into Astro World." The crowd erupts, and somewhere, amidst all the chaos, a simple truth remains. In this world, no one is truly famous enough to escape the ridiculousness that is the Diddy freak-off party. The boundaries of reality, celebrity, and absurdity are completely obliterated. The night will be talked about for years, and by morning, it's guaranteed to have turned into a viral legend. The night was electric, the energy palpable. It was the legendary Diddy freak-off, the party of the decade, and everyone who was anyone had been invited. Celebrities, moguls, influencers, and thrill-seekers alike filled the sprawling estate perched on a private island, the kind of place where money and fame weren't just markers of status. They were prerequisites for entry. The lights were so bright, they practically melted into the sky, neon waves of pink and purple dancing across the ocean breeze. Music was blaring from every direction, with DJ Khaled's team spinning the hottest tracks and a rotating cast of guest DJs pushing the crowd to new heights of wildness. Diddy, naturally, was at the center of it all. In an all-black outfit with a glittering gold chain, he moved through the crowd like a god, nodding to friends, giving orders, and sipping from his golden goblet like he was presiding over a kingdom of chaos. His smile was infectious, and his presence commanded respect. Everyone knew the freak-off was going to be an unforgettable spectacle, and tonight was no exception. The mansion was an architectural marvel, floor-to-ceiling windows, cascading staircases, and a pool that seemed to go on forever. In one corner, Drake and Future were locked in a battle of freestyle verses, while Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion dominated the dance floor, with people crowding around to watch their twerking contest. Lizzo had just pulled off a full split, showing no mercy, and the crowd went wild. But the real chaos had only just begun. In the midst of the celebration, Jamie Foxx, legendary actor, comedian, and singer, was making his grand entrance. Foxx was dressed to the nines, rocking a custom-made velvet blazer and shiny black loafers. As always, he was the life of the party, cracking jokes, laughing, and setting the mood for the night. With his larger-than-life personality, he quickly became the center of attention, shaking hands with the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio and Kendall Jenner while sipping on a drink from the bar. But little did he know, a mischievous plot was already unfolding behind the scenes. Back at the bar, Tyga and Lil Wayne were plotting with a group of overly enthusiastic bartenders who were well aware of the wild, reckless streak that ran through this crowd. As they prepped a special freak-off cocktail, Tyga's eyes glinted with mischief. The drink was laced with something stronger than just alcohol, but nobody cared. It was all about taking the party to the next level. and everyone was already riding that fine line between being the life of the party and, well, having the night take a dangerous turn. When Jamie returned to the bar to grab another drink, the freak-off concoction was waiting for him, prepared by one of the party's in-the-know bartenders. He toasted to the crowd and threw it back in one go, not thinking twice. What he didn't realize was that the drink wasn't just a mix of vodka, tequila, and fruit punch. It was laced with an untraceable sedative that would soon turn him into the unwitting star of a very different kind of party. Not long after downing the drink, Jamie's demeanor began to change. His usual sharp wit softened, and his movements grew sluggish. At first, he tried to shake it off, dismissing the odd feeling in his stomach as a side effect of the high-energy night. But things quickly took a dark turn. He leaned against a pillar, his face pale and sweat forming on his brow. A few minutes later, his legs gave way, and he collapsed in the middle of the dance floor, the world spinning around him. The party continued to rage on, people laughing, dancing, and having the time of their lives. But suddenly, the mood shifted when a ripple of alarm spread through the crowd. Tyga, who'd been keeping an eye on Foxx all night, noticed that the actor was slumped over, visibly unwell. By now it was obvious that something was wrong. The music didn't stop, but the frantic whispers spread faster than wildfire. Everyone thought Jamie was just being extra. Maybe a bit too much of the party had gotten to him. But something wasn't right. Diddy, who had been in the midst of a heated conversation with Jay-Z, quickly spotted the commotion. His eyes scanned the crowd, landing on Jamie. As he made his way over to the stricken star, the situation escalated. Kanye West, who had been uncharacteristically quiet for the night, jumped into action, demanding security clear the area around Jamie. "Yo, get him out of here," Kanye barked. The crowd parted, and soon Jamie was surrounded by a handful of concerned partygoers. Kendall Jenner, who had initially thought it was a stunt, looked down at Foxx and immediately saw the severity of the situation. Her phone was out in a heartbeat, dialing for help. Diddy was still standing nearby, looking both concerned and oddly unfazed. He leaned in, quickly assessing the scene. His face hardened, and he gave a subtle nod to his bodyguards, signaling them to remove the tainted drink from circulation. He didn't have to say it aloud, but the message was clear. Whoever had spiked Jamie's drink would pay the price. Back at the bar, Tyga and Lil Wayne exchanged worried glances, realizing their joke had gone too far. As the situation unfolded, Drake and Jay-Z attempted to keep the peace by distracting the rest of the crowd with an impromptu performance. Drake, ever the showman, called out, "Who's ready for another round of In My Feelings?" But the energy was different now. The party had been tainted, and no one was truly laughing anymore. As Jamie was carefully escorted to a private lounge area, he was still half-conscious, unable to fully comprehend what had happened. His bodyguard and a team of medical staff quickly assessed the situation. Diddy, who had been nothing short of a gracious host up until that point, was now in full business mode, his face tight and his eyes scanning every inch of the room. His mind raced. Who had done this, and why? He wasn't about to let someone ruin his night, and definitely not someone as high profile as Jamie Foxx. He motioned for security to identify the culprits, while the party went on in a suspended state of chaos. As Jamie began to regain some of his composure in the private lounge, Beyoncé, who had been observing from the balcony, quietly made her way over. "He'll be all right," she whispered, offering reassurance. But even she couldn't ignore the undercurrent of tension that had swept through the night. For the first time that evening, the playful absurdity of the party had shifted, leaving behind a chilling reminder that sometimes things can go too far. Back on the dance floor, though, the party raged on, albeit with a quieter, more cautious energy. Lil Nas X, the crowd's new darling, hit the stage, and the crowd cheered. His energy was contagious. But as the night wore on, and the hours stretched into the early morning, everyone in that mansion knew one thing for sure. The freak-off would never be the same. And Diddy, ever the mastermind, wasn't about to let this mystery go unsolved. The game had changed. But one thing remained true. The freakiness was far from over. The party would go on. The boundaries of fame and recklessness still being pushed, even as Jamie Foxx, grinning weakly from his lounge chair, became the unwitting victim of a night that no one would ever forget. The night was electric, the air charged with the kind of wild anticipation that only a Diddy party could conjure. The mansion was on a private island, the kind of place that felt more like a dream than reality. The stars were out in full force, legends of music, film, fashion, and business, all gathered under one roof. Diddy, of course, was the orchestrator of it all, the Pied Piper of excess, living for the spectacle, and knowing this would be a night people would talk about for years. No one could resist the allure of the Diddy freak-off, a party so hedonistic, so over the top, that it could only exist in the rarefied air of the super famous. From the moment you walked in, you were hit with the overwhelming pulse of music. DJ Khaled was on the decks, his beats reverberating through the floors and walls, while a massive chandelier hung above the crowd, casting colorful reflections that only heightened the surreal atmosphere. The entire estate looked like something out of a futuristic nightclub, glowing neon lights, velvet ropes, and white-labeled bottles of champagne everywhere you turned. The smell of expensive cigars and high-end perfume mixed with the scent of freshly popped bottles of Cristal. But this wasn't just any party. It was a freak-off, and the rules were clear. Excess, chaos, and debauchery were not just welcomed. They were the main attractions. The start of the madness Diddy, dressed head to toe in an outfit that screamed king of the world, walked through the crowd with his signature swagger. Every step he took was like a command. He gave a sly nod to Jay-Z and Beyoncé, who were deep in conversation near the bar. Drake and Lil Wayne were off in the corner, enjoying a private toast while cracking jokes. Over by the pool, Kendall Jenner was caught up in a deep conversation with Tyga. Everyone was in their element, but it was clear that something bigger, something wilder, was coming. People were dancing, laughing, and sipping drinks, the energy on the verge of chaos. Cardi B was already center stage, twerking with a ferocity that drew all eyes to her. Megan Thee Stallion joined in, and together they made the floor shake with their incredible energy. But the crowd wasn't just there to watch the dancers. They were there to be a part of the wildest, most unpredictable night imaginable. As the night wore on, a drink began circulating, one that looked so beautiful it seemed too good to be true. A glowing, holographic cocktail with a rim of edible gold and a glowing neon core. People were snapping photos, posting to Instagram, but what they didn't know was that the drink had been laced with a potent mix of substances that no one would have ever expected. A designer cocktail, custom-made to push the night into absolute mayhem. Whoever had created it, some shady bartender in Diddy's circle, had added an extra dose of something that would make everyone lose their inhibitions, and for a few, make them lose control entirely. Jamie Foxx, the ever-charismatic actor and comedian, was one of the first to grab the drink, a mischievous grin on his face as he tipped it back. His charm was undeniable, and the crowd loved him. He took a few steps back, chatting with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kylie Jenner. But as the minutes passed, something strange began to happen. Fox's usual sharp wit began to dull. His eyes became glazed, and his jokes got slower, more spaced out. He leaned against a pillar, trying to gather his thoughts, but it felt like the world was closing in on him. At the same time, Kendall Jenner had also taken a sip from the drink. Within moments, she stumbled a little, her posture shifting from confident to almost clumsy. She clutched the side of the bar for support as the room around her started to spin. Tyga was immediately concerned, helping her sit down at a nearby lounge, his eyes darting around the room. But this wasn't just the start. More people were feeling it. Things start to unravel. As the party raged on, more celebrities began to visibly feel the effects. Drake, who had been toasting with Lil Wayne, suddenly found himself laughing uncontrollably, his speech starting to slur as he tried to keep his balance. Machine Gun Kelly, who'd been strutting his stuff on the dance floor, looked around with a wild grin plastered across his face. But then his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto a plush velvet couch. Paris Hilton, ever the diva, took a sip of the drink and immediately started laughing hysterically. But it was almost as if the world was getting too loud for her to handle. She grabbed at her purse, desperately searching for something to calm her nerves. Meanwhile, Beyoncé and Jay-Z had already noticed the shift in the atmosphere. They'd seen it before, people overindulging at parties. But this was different. The energy in the room wasn't just wild, it was dangerously unpredictable. Beyoncé leaned in close to Jay-Z, her hand gripping his, as they exchanged a silent look that said everything. Snoop Dogg, ever the cool and calm presence in the room, noticed it too. He raised an eyebrow, shrugged, and took another hit from his blunt, moving with a quiet confidence as the madness escalated around him. Over at the DJ booth, Future was hyping up the crowd, but even he noticed the sudden shifts in behavior. His usual chill swagger was replaced with an anxious look as he scanned the room. He glanced at Diddy, who was already on the move, talking to a few of his bodyguards and keeping an eye on the situation. The crowd, still in the throes of music and laughter, was now beginning to act out. Some people were dancing wildly, while others were having strange outbursts, laughing for no reason, bumping into walls, even stumbling across the floor like they had no control over their bodies. Tyler, the creator, ever the anarchist, saw it as a chance to take things even further. He grabbed the mic and began shouting, "Let's turn this up, freak-off style." But even his voice had a strange, distorted edge to it. He didn't seem to realize how out of control the situation was becoming. As he hopped into the crowd, laughing like a madman, others joined him in a chaotic, disjointed dance. And then it happened. Kylie Jenner collapsed onto the floor, her face pale, as she tried to keep herself upright. Kendall, still recovering, ran over to help, but the room had now descended into a chaotic frenzy. People were no longer acting like celebrities. They were just lost, untethered, floating on whatever high the drugs had induced. Kim Kardashian, who had been lounging on a velvet chair, suddenly leapt to her feet, her eyes wide with confusion. She grabbed a glass of water and stumbled toward Diddy, her voice panicked. "Diddy, something's wrong with everyone." Diddy, who had been surveying the scene from the back of the room, finally realized that the night was spiraling out of control. He signaled to his bodyguards, who immediately started to clear the area around the bar, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The party, which was meant to be a celebration of excess, had turned into something more dangerous. The aftermath. As the party began to slow down, Jamie Foxx, still woozy, was escorted out of the room. He'd been one of the first to be affected, but now everyone was feeling it. Some were barely coherent, others were laughing hysterically, and a few were just plain lost. The security team worked quickly to contain the chaos, escorting celebrities out, calling for medical help where needed, and making sure that the night didn't descend into an even bigger nightmare. Diddy was standing in the corner, watching as the madness slowly died down. He couldn't deny it. The night had gotten away from him. But that's what happens when you mix the wrong ingredients at the wrong party. The whole thing felt surreal, like a bad dream. But the music was still pounding, and the lights were still flashing. As the sun began to rise and the last few stragglers left, Diddy walked out to the balcony, his mind racing. This night would be the talk of the town for years, but not for the reasons he had hoped. The freak-off had gone from a night of celebration to one of chaos, and while the stars would recover, the damage had already been done. One thing was clear: no party, no matter how legendary, was ever truly under control. The freak-off was back. And when Diddy throws a party, it's not just a party, it's an experience. A wild, unhinged celebration where nothing is off limits and everyone is expected to bring their A-game. This time, the venue was a massive, ultra-modern mansion perched on the edge of a secluded cliff overlooking the ocean. A place that felt as luxurious as it was completely untouchable. The party was invite only, and the list? It read like the who's who of Hollywood and the music world: A-list actors, models, musicians, tech moguls, influencers, and a few mysterious faces who might as well have stepped out of the pages of an alternate universe. And Emily, a rising star in the modeling world, had just been invited. She'd heard about Diddy's parties before, rumors that it was where the real fun went down, the kind of night that had everyone talking for months. A curious mix of excitement and nerves ran through her as she stepped out of the sleek black limo and onto the white marble floors of the mansion. Her dress shimmered under the glowing lights, an intricate high-fashion number that barely clung to her skin, but still held a sense of grace. She was a model, after all, poised, composed, and used to being in the spotlight. Little did she know the spotlight tonight would shine in very different ways. The moment Emily walked through the front doors, she was hit by a sensory overload. The house was more of a palace than a mansion. Wide open spaces, contemporary art pieces that felt like they belonged in museums, and a soundtrack of pulsating beats. Future was already DJing, spinning an electric mix of rap, banana trap, and EDM that got the crowd moving. The vibe was instant, sexy, carefree, and utterly chaotic. The mansion was alive, full of energy. People were already dancing in every corner, drinks were flowing, and the air felt thick with the weight of excess. She was immediately greeted by Bella Hadid and Gigi Hadid, who gave her a warm welcome. They were as beautiful and confident as you would expect, laughing and posing for selfies. Kendall Jenner was at the bar, chatting with a group of influencers, while Lizzo and Cardi B were already center stage, leading an impromptu twerking contest. Emily was taken aback by how wild and uninhibited everyone seemed. These were supermodels, and they were acting like anything but. "Welcome to the freak-off," Bella said with a wink, handing Emily a bright green cocktail. "You're going to love it here." Emily, smiling, took the drink. It tasted sweet and tropical. She knocked it back in one go, savoring the fruity notes as she glanced around the room. As she took it all in, she realized this was no ordinary party. This was next level. As the night unfolded, the chaos only intensified. A group of dancers in neon outfits emerged from nowhere, twirling and flipping in perfect sync as a cloud of smoke filled the room. The crowd erupted in applause and laughter. Drake suddenly appeared in the middle of the dance floor, his own personal entourage in tow. He locked eyes with Rihanna, who was chilling with a $AP Rocky in a corner booth. But as she raised her drink to toast, her gaze shifted to something else. Tyler, the creator, was dancing like no one had ever seen before. his movements exaggerated, offbeat, but with a kind of fluid intensity that drew a crowd around him. The crowd cheered him on, egging him to go crazier. It wasn't long before Emily noticed how many of the guests were intoxicated. The drinks kept flowing freely, but so did the drugs. Kanye West, his face obscured by a custom-designed mask, was having a heated discussion with Jay-Z, both of them occasionally flashing big smiles but constantly scanning the room. Emily couldn't help but notice the odd, surreal energy in the air. The party was turning into something strange. It wasn't just about fun anymore. It was like watching a circus where no one was even pretending to follow the rules. By the time midnight hit, Emily felt like she was in the middle of a fever dream. People were making out in the corners of the room. Lana Del Rey and $AP Rocky sharing a slow, passionate kiss by the bar, while Justin Bieber and Hailey Bieber were lost in their own bubble, seemingly oblivious to everything going on around them. Models, rappers, and actors had all fallen into some kind of wild rhythm, where everything felt both intimate and completely detached from reality. Cardi B, never one to shy away from the spotlight, had the crowd in a frenzy. She grabbed the mic from the DJ booth, announcing an impromptu rap battle. But what followed was not what anyone expected. The audience was mostly just stumbling through their words, some slurring their speech, others throwing wild, disjointed lines that made no sense at all. It was almost as if everyone had been drugged, or at least intoxicated beyond recognition. The freak-off was back. And when Diddy throws a party, it's not just a party, it's an experience. A wild, unhinged celebration where nothing is off limits and everyone is expected to bring their A game. This time, the venue was a massive, ultra-modern mansion perched on the edge of a secluded cliff overlooking the ocean, a place that felt as luxurious as it was completely untouchable. The party was invite only, and the list? It read like the who's who of Hollywood and the music world, A-list actors, models, musicians, tech moguls, influencers, and a few mysterious faces who might as well have stepped out of the pages of an alternate universe. And Emily, a rising star in the modeling world, had just been invited. She'd heard about Diddy's parties before, rumors that it was where the real fun went down, the kind of night that had everyone talking for months. A curious mix of excitement and nerves ran through her as she stepped out of the sleek black limo and onto the white marble floors of the mansion. Her dress shimmered under the glowing lights, an intricate high-fashion number that barely clung to her skin, but still held a sense of grace. She was a model, after all, poised, composed, and used to being in the spotlight. Little did she know the spotlight tonight would shine in very different ways. The moment Emily walked through the front doors, she was hit by a sensory overload. The house was more of a palace than a mansion. Wide open spaces, contemporary art pieces that felt like they belonged in museums, and a soundtrack of pulsating beats. Future was already DJing, spinning an electric mix of rap, a trap, and EDM that got the crowd moving. The vibe was instant, sexy, carefree, and utterly chaotic. The mansion was alive, full of energy. People were already dancing in every corner, drinks were flowing, and the air felt thick with the weight of excess. She was immediately greeted by Bella Hadid and Gigi Hadid, who gave her a warm welcome. They were as beautiful and confident as you would expect, laughing and posing for selfies. Kendall Jenner was at the bar, chatting with a group of influencers, while Lizzo and Cardi B were already center stage, leading an impromptu twerking contest. Emily was taken aback by how wild and uninhibited everyone seemed. These were supermodels, and they were acting like anything but. "Welcome to the freak-off," Bella said with a wink, handing Emily a bright green cocktail. "You're going to love it here." Emily, smiling, took the drink. It tasted sweet and tropical. She knocked it back in one go, savoring the fruity notes as she glanced around the room. As she took it all in, she realized this was no ordinary party. This was next level. As the night unfolded, the chaos only intensified. A group of dancers in neon outfits emerged from nowhere, twirling and flipping in perfect sync as a cloud of smoke filled the room. The crowd erupted in applause and laughter. Drake suddenly appeared in the middle of the dance floor, his own personal entourage in tow. He locked eyes with Rihanna, who was chilling with a $1 AP Rocky in a corner booth. But as she raised her drink to toast, her gaze shifted to something else. Tyler, the creator, was dancing like no one had ever seen before. His movements exaggerated, offbeat, but with a kind of fluid intensity that drew a crowd around him. The crowd cheered him on, egging him to go crazier. It wasn't long before Emily noticed how many of the guests were intoxicated. The drinks kept flowing freely, but so did the drugs. Kanye West, his face obscured by a custom-designed mask, was having a heated discussion with Jay-Z, both of them occasionally flashing big smiles but constantly scanning the room. Emily couldn't help but notice the odd, surreal energy in the air. The party was turning into something strange. It wasn't just about fun anymore. It was like watching a circus where no one was even pretending to follow the rules. By the time midnight hit, Emily felt like she was in the middle of a fever dream. People were making out in the corners of the room. Lana Del Rey and a $1 AP Rocky sharing a slow, passionate kiss by the bar, while Justin Bieber and Hailey Bieber were lost in their own bubble, seemingly oblivious to everything going on around them. Models, rappers, and actors had all fallen into some kind of wild rhythm, where everything felt both intimate and completely detached from reality. Cardi B, never one to shy away from the spotlight, had the crowd in a frenzy. She grabbed the mic from the DJ booth, announcing an impromptu rap battle. But what followed was not what anyone expected. The audience was mostly just stumbling through their words, some slurring their speech, others throwing wild, disjointed lines that made no sense at all. It was almost as if everyone had been drugged, or at least intoxicated beyond recognition. The night was alive with energy at Diddy's Freak Off, an annual event that lived up to its reputation for being the wildest party in the celebrity world. This year's venue, an opulent mansion perched on the cliffs of a private island, a fortress of excess and indulgence, where the rich and famous were free to lose themselves in every conceivable way. The mansion was a playground, neon lights flashing, bodies swarming, and the music pulsating so loudly that the whole island seemed to vibrate with every beat. This was where the boundaries of normalcy blurred, where even the most disciplined stars allowed their primal instincts to run wild. For Chris, it was just another night on the job. A middle-aged, no-nonsense security guard, Chris had been assigned to watch the guest entrance. He'd worked for Diddy before, had seen the raucousness of these parties from the outside in, but he had never quite been prepared for what he would witness tonight. Diddy had a way of keeping things under wraps, always managing to make sure that the most outrageous things stayed hidden in the shadows. But tonight, for whatever reason, the veil of secrecy started to slip away. What Chris saw, well, it was something he'd never forget. The first clue. It all started innocently enough. The first few hours of the party were more or less typical. People were arriving in limos, private jets, and sleek black SUVs, stepping out in designer outfits, flashing their smiles for the cameras, and greeting each other with enthusiasm. The flow of luxury champagne seemed endless, and the guests moved with the same effortless swagger. Rihanna strolled past Chris with a crowd of bodyguards, laughing with Jay-Z and Drake, her presence larger than life. Everyone was happy to mingle at first, in the pristine glow of the mansion's entrance hall. But then, as the night wore on, Chris noticed something strange. The guests were becoming more erratic. People he knew to be composed and dignified, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kendall Jenner, Bella Hadid, started to exhibit odd behavior. There was a frantic energy in the air, an almost palpable shift. Chris saw Kendall walking backward down the grand staircase, laughing hysterically. Leonardo, always a bit eccentric, was running through the halls at full speed, only to stop suddenly, drop to the floor, and start rolling around like a child. It was as if the mansion itself had turned into a maze of confusion, and the guests were all trying to navigate it with a growing sense of madness. Chris had seen things go off the rails at these parties before, but he had never seen it go this far, this fast. The night was just beginning, but it was already spiraling. He called over to a fellow guard. "Hey, you notice anything weird going on?" Chris asked, trying to keep his voice low. The other guard just shook his head, a blank expression on his face. "It's just the usual. Let them have their fun. They're celebrities." But Chris wasn't so sure. There was something off. He scanned the room again, trying to brush it off. That's when he saw Tyga and Lil Wayne laughing maniacally, hands full of drink, clearly stumbling over their feet as they tried to keep their composure. But the oddest thing, their eyes were wild. They weren't just drunk. Something was different. Something was making them lose themselves in a way that wasn't just alcohol-induced. Chris had seen his fair share of crazy nights, but this was like something out of a different dimension. The strange cocktail. An hour into the madness, the party started to pick up steam. The crowd had spilled out onto the pool deck, the music vibrating through the night, lights reflecting off the surface of the water. Chris's position gave him a great view of the entire space, and he began to notice how many of the guests were all gravitating toward a certain part of the bar. It wasn't just any bar. It was the bar. The one Diddy had set up himself, an opulent shrine to excess with bottles of rare liquors stacked high and gold-plated goblets ready to be filled. But tonight, something was off about the drink everyone was suddenly after. A tall, mysterious bartender, Jacek, a European mixologist with a reputation for creating experimental cocktails, had been working the bar all night. His concoctions were the talk of the party, but Chris couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Jacek was moving with a strange intensity, pouring drinks with precision, and then slipping in a quick glance toward the guests' faces. He'd handed drinks to people like Drake, Future, and Kendall with a smile, but something about their reactions felt forced. It wasn't long before Chris realized the situation was getting even stranger. The guests began to flock toward the bar in a way that felt almost ritualistic, like they were entranced. A few drinks in, and the first signs of true wildness began to unfold. Snoop Dogg, who had been chilling by the pool with a blunt in hand, started to sway unnaturally, his head tilted to one side as though he'd lost all sense of space and time. His bodyguard stepped in, trying to keep him from falling over, but Snoop seemed completely out of it. His once calm demeanor had completely dissolved into frantic energy, his voice raising as he shouted, "This party got me feeling different tonight." At the same time, Kylie Jenner, usually poised, was slurring her words as she danced uncontrollably in a circle. She was smiling, but her movements were erratic, her eyes glassy. Travis Scott was nearby, trying to catch her attention, but it was clear something had thrown both of them off their usual rhythm. There was a moment when Chris thought he saw something in Kylie's hand, something small and unmarked, like a vial of some kind. But when he looked again, it was gone. That's when he knew. The drinks were laced. Chris had worked too many parties to not understand the signs. The wild, incoherent energy, the dilated pupils, the slurred speech, the erratic behavior. It was all too familiar. The guests weren't just drunk, they were altered. But why? Who was behind it? Diddy was nowhere to be found, and Chris knew this wasn't something he could handle on his own. He signaled to a senior security officer, but before the officer could come over, chaos erupted. First, Jamie Foxx collapsed, a blur of laughter and disorientation. He'd been joking around with Kevin Hart, but now he was on the floor, barely able to get up. A group of bodyguards tried to help him, but Foxx only laughed harder, rolling around, trying to engage with anyone nearby. Meanwhile, Drake and Lil Wayne, who had been in the thick of things, suddenly started shouting at each other, their words jumbled. The music had become an overwhelming hum, their voices competing with the pounding bass. Drake tried to climb onto a table, his shirt half off, while Cardi B ran by, grabbing him by the wrist and pulling him back down. "What the hell's happening to us?" she shouted, but it was clear no one had the answer. Chris watched the scene unfold with growing horror. The rich, famous faces he'd seen time and time again were now reduced to something else. Wild animals trapped in a party that had turned into a madhouse. The mansion had become a stage for this bizarre show of unraveling control. Everywhere he looked, people were spinning out of reality. Kendall Jenner was now making snow angels on the floor by the bar. Beyoncé, who had been one of the last to get a drink, stood frozen, her arms raised as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Jay-Z and Kanye West were laughing uncontrollably, their conversations nonsensical, filled with disjointed statements about the future of rap and the energy of the universe. It was more than just a party. It was a nightmare, a fever dream with no escape. Chris moved quickly through the crowds, trying to get control of the situation, but the scene was beyond saving. He saw a flash of movement from the corner of his eye. Tyga and Future had started a bizarre twerk-off, shaking their hips and throwing themselves into an increasingly frantic competition. The guests were cheering them on like it was a gladiator match, only there was no clear winner, just a spiraling descent into madness. At one point, Kylie Jenner, her face flushed, eyes wide, grabbed Chris's arm, looking up at him as though seeing him for the first time. "Where's Diddy?" she asked, her voice oddly detached. "I need to talk to him." Chris glanced around, trying to make sense of it all, but he didn't know what to say. The mansion, once a luxurious paradise, had become a prison of bizarre energy, a place where nothing made sense and everyone was lost. Diddy's party had turned into something darker, something unhinged. By the time the night ended, Chris had seen enough to last a lifetime. The guests were scattered, some being escorted out, others carried off on stretchers, still giggling uncontrollably or muttering strange, incoherent phrases. The party had been a disaster, a brilliant, horrific disaster. For Chris, it was just another night on the job. But he would never forget what he saw at Diddy's freak-off, a world where the line between fame, fantasy, and madness was erased completely. The night was dark and electric as Diddy's infamous freak-off party kicked into high gear. The location, a secluded mansion perched on a remote cliffside, buzzed with an eerie anticipation, like a place that could have been pulled from a nightmare. It was designed to disorient, to overwhelm, and to break down any sense of control. Inside, the walls were lined with deep, pulsating neon lights that gave everything a washed-out, surreal glow. The bass of the music vibrated through the floor, like the mansion itself was alive, thumping to the beats of whatever dark force Diddy had summoned. The guests, a mix of celebrities, influencers, and mysterious figures, had gathered, ready to indulge in excess. But tonight, something felt wrong. And Charleston White, the controversial figure known for his polarizing opinions and unpredictable personality, had just walked in. Charleston wasn't the typical guest at a Diddy party. He wasn't a rapper, an actor, or a supermodel. But he had made waves in the past, his brash, unapologetic approach to the world drawing both hate and admiration in equal measure. Diddy, ever the showman, had invited him anyway, no doubt intrigued by the chaos that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Charleston walked into the mansion with his usual swagger, dressed in a crisp, almost too neat suit that looked out of place next to the flocks of women in skin-tight dresses and men in designer streetwear. His eyes were sharp, scanning the room like a hawk looking for its next meal. There was an unsettling energy about the place, and Charleston noticed it right away. It wasn't just the loud music, the drunken antics, or the glitzy facade. There was something deeper, something darker at work. The people in the room, usually so polished and poised, seemed off. Their eyes were wild, unfocused, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. People were laughing, but their laughter sounded hollow, like they were performing for an audience that wasn't there. Diddy was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a strange woman with platinum blonde hair and an air of authority was moving through the crowd, whispering to people, her eyes scanning the room like she was looking for something or someone. Charleston didn't like it, but he wasn't about to leave. Not when the world was watching. Not when the party was just starting to get weird. Charleston made his way toward the bar, where a large group of celebrities were gathered, each one holding brightly colored cocktails that shimmered with an unnatural glow. He was greeted by Lil Wayne, who was holding a drink that seemed to slosh around too easily for something as thick as it looked. "You came for the fun, huh?" Wayne slurred, his eyes glazed over. "Man, tonight's different. You feel me?" Charleston gave a half smirk, not one to engage in light chit-chat, especially with someone who seemed barely in control of his own speech. "Different? What you mean by that?" Lil Wayne leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Everything, man. They got that new stuff in those drinks. Ain't no regular party shit going down tonight. You might want to watch out." Charleston laughed. "You can tell me all about it when you're sober, brother. That's if you're ever sober again." Before Wayne could respond, a commotion erupted across the room. Kanye West, eyes darting back and forth, stood up from a plush leather sofa where he had been sitting with Jay-Z and Drake. He yelled something incoherent, but loud enough to catch the attention of the room. "This ain't real," Kanye shouted, his voice full of rage, his body shaking as if he were fighting something invisible. "None of this is real. We're trapped in a simulation." People laughed, unsure whether he was joking or not. But the tension was palpable. It wasn't just his outburst that set off the alarm bells for Charleston. It was the fact that Kanye didn't seem right. His hands were twitching, his pupils were dilated, and he looked like he might be on the verge of either breaking down or breaking through into some alternate reality. Drake stood up, laughing at first, but his expression quickly turned from playful to something darker than even his music portrayed. His face twisted into an almost demonic grin. "No, man," he said softly, as if he was talking to himself. "He's not wrong. We are trapped." Charleston raised an eyebrow, his instincts kicking into overdrive. He had been to some strange parties before, parties with drugs, fights, and altercations, but something in the air tonight felt different. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. The crowd began to get restless. What started as a wild but controlled celebration was spiraling out of control, and Charleston, being the outsider, was beginning to realize he was witnessing something far darker than he had anticipated. At the center of it all was Kylie Jenner, who had somehow managed to get a hold of a microphone. She stood on a platform, her voice trembling as she spoke. "This is it, y'all. This is our time. We're not going back. Don't you see? We're going to stay in this moment forever." Her eyes were wide, glazed over, and her smile was unnatural. People started to cheer, but it didn't sound like genuine excitement. There was something manic about it, as though everyone had been swept up in a collective delusion. Charleston's heart began to race. He tried to move away from the crowd, instinctively pushing through the throngs of drunken, disoriented guests. The air felt thicker now, like it was pressing down on him. He needed to get out. But as he turned to head toward the back exit, he collided with Cardi B, who was stumbling out of a hallway, her face wide-eyed and wild. "Charleston, you gotta get out of here," Cardi screamed, grabbing his arm with surprising force. "Something's wrong. This ain't no party. They're doing something to us. We're trapped, man." Before Charleston could respond, a loud, horrifying scream echoed from the other side of the room. It wasn't a playful scream. It was the sound of someone in pain, of someone fighting to escape something beyond their control. Charleston's eyes darted toward the noise, and he saw Rihanna being dragged across the floor by two large figures, her body convulsing uncontrollably. She was kicking, her face contorted in terror, screaming for help. But nobody was moving to intervene. Instead, the guests watched with a sickening mix of curiosity and morbid fascination. They weren't trying to help, they were watching. "What the hell is going on here?" Charleston muttered under his breath. It didn't take long for him to realize. This wasn't just a party. This was something far more sinister, something calculated. The mansion, the drinks, the people. They weren't just being drugged, they were being controlled. Charleston made a quick decision. His instincts kicked in, and he bolted toward the exit, weaving through the crowd of deranged celebrities and party-goers. As he ran, he caught sight of Diddy, or at least someone dressed like Diddy, standing at the top of a staircase, staring down at the chaos with a smile that was not the kind of smile you'd expect from someone hosting a party. It was almost as if he was enjoying the madness unfolding below him, like a puppet master pulling the strings of his guests. Charleston's heart pounded in his chest as he burst out into the night air, finally free from the madness inside. He paused for a moment, sucking in the cool air, trying to steady his breath. What had he just witnessed? As he looked back at the mansion, the lights flickered, almost as if it were alive, watching him. He could still hear the muffled music coming from inside, distorted, like it was trying to reach through the walls and pull him back. Charleston took a step back, his mind racing. He knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going back in there. Not for anyone, not for anything. He turned and walked away, the distant laughter from inside growing fainter with every step. But deep down, he knew one thing. The party wasn't over. Not yet. At the